And I thank you guys so much for tuning in to yet another episode of My Orchid Adventure with me, Maria Young. Now, in today's episode, we are going to be talking about how phenomenal the Psychopsis Orchid is. And I'm going to be sharing with you some pretty fascinating facts about them that I believe that many of us do not know, or perhaps we do, it's just not too often talked about. But I believe this information is so worthy to be shared because you guys already know the more that we know, the more that we can grow. So indeed, today we are going to be digging deep and we are going to discover some of the phenomenal hidden treasures of the Psychopsis Orchid. But before we begin, I definitely want to give a brief shout out to all of the good orchid folks out there that participated in my Orchid Reflections Challenge. Indeed, I challenged you guys and you guys stepped up to the plate, so I want to recognize you guys. Thank you so much to OME Olivia's Water Culture. Also, Orchids and Finbows, Randy from Maui, Orchid Love ATX, Tropical Plant Party, Sharon Short, Bumblebee, Denise H, and also Roger Frampton. Thank you guys so much. And if you guys want to check out those videos, you can check it out under Orchid Reflections in my playlist where I did compile all of those videos. And if you want to see my personal Orchid Reflections, you can click right here and it'll take you to that video because I did get pretty intimate with you guys there. I gave you an up close and personal look into what happened to me last year. But if you guys did not get a chance to do an Orchid Reflections video and would like to do so, you guys know it is never too late. Just be sure to let me know and I will definitely add you guys to the list. And I do have to tell you, I really enjoyed each and every one of those videos. Thank you so much. I really learned from you guys and through your experiences. Now, I do want to give an extra special shout out to one particular individual by the name of Orchids and Finbows, because I believe he definitely stepped up to the plate, making his videos so creative and so entertaining. So indeed, that was my most favorite Orchid Reflections video. Thank you so much, Mr. Orchids and Finbows. And if you do not know who he is, where have you guys been at? He is a phenomenal orchid grower, so handy dandy, and growing his orchids from Africa. On his channel, he shows his phenomenal orchid collection and also shows you exactly how he grows his orchids in his location. So definitely a great channel to check out. If you guys have not checked him out yet, definitely do so right here. Go ahead and click on that link. And if you guys have not subscribed, oh my gosh, what are you guys waiting for? Like, subscribe already. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get our Psychopsis Orchid adventure started, and let's do that right now. Boom! And right here, folks, we have some pretty amazing Psychopsis orchids in front of us, and we're going to be using them as an example to talk to you guys about the fascinating facts about the Psychopsis orchids that many of us don't even know. But before we begin doing that, let's go ahead and get a closer look at their growth habit and also their growth structure to give us a better understanding. So one of the first things to note about the Psychopsis orchid is that they are sympodial orchids, meaning that they grow to the side, versus monopodial, which means growing from the top. The size of its pseudobulb can actually vary just depending on the age and the maturity of the orchid. You will also find that the pseudobulb has a round shape and also somewhat flattened as well. And if we take an even closer look, you will find that the pseudobulb has a rough and very tough exterior. You will also find that it is somewhat bumpy, and on a mature pseudobulb, you will begin to find offshoots growing from the base of the pseudobulb. And what these offshoots are basic plantlets or future pseudobulbs. And on this particular Psychopsis right here, you're actually noticing 4 new growths of pseudobulbs. You can see it right here. Here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, and also 4. And out of this one particular pseudobulb right here, you will notice 3 actually emerging. 1, 2, and 3. So indeed, multiple growths can come from one pseudobulb. And what can also emerge from the base of the pseudobulb are the Psychopsis spikes, as you are seeing this little one coming right here. Also, if we take a look over here, you are seeing yet another Psychopsis spike coming off of the same pseudobulb. So indeed, off of one pseudobulb, you can also get multiple spikes as well. And the way that you can tell the difference between the spike and a new growth of a new pseudobulb is the fact that the spike is far more slender and growing more upright, versus this new growth right here of a future pseudobulb that has just begun to emerge from this mature pseudobulb. And as you can see, it is just a bit more plump, and as it begins to grow, you will notice that it will begin to become a little bit more flattened and also growing to the side, and that is a definite sign that it will become a future pseudobulb. And right here is a pretty mature new growth, as you can see, pretty large in size, and soon and very soon the pseudobulb will begin to grow at the base, taking over this bottom area, and you will again begin to see those pseudobulbs circular and a little bit flattened as well. And as the new growth begins to grow in size, eventually what will happen is this leaf right here will mysteriously appear. And the size of the foliage can actually have a variation as well, just depending on how mature the plant is. As you can see, as it grows, it becomes more mature and the leaves do become a lot bigger. Now, there can also be many differences within the Psychopsis foliage. I have seen some that are more heavily mottled, while others are lightly mottled, and some are yet solid color. Also, the colors in the leaves can differ as well, from your lighter greens to your darker greens, and some have even a rusty orangey color in the leaves as well. Now, the type of Psychopsis that I have does expose somewhat of a mottling pattern in the leaves in the earlier stages as the leaves are growing. But once it becomes mature, you are going to notice that that mottling does disappear, or you are left with just the outer edges with that mottling effect. But just as a side note, the type of lighting we are giving our orchids can also affect the color as well. So the brighter the lighting is, you guessed it, the lighter the color will be. And also, the darker the light is, you guessed it again, the darker the leaves will be as well. The shape of the Psychopsis leaf is somewhat elongated and also having an oval shape. The texture of this leaf is very leathery, very tough, and very durable. It also has somewhat of a texture on the surface of the leaf where it reminds me of rubbing your fingers across cardboard paper, a definite surface that you can feel. Now let's get to the good part. Let us talk about the amazing facts of the Psychopsis spikes. Now, as you guys know, these spikes right here can get very, did I mention very long? And these spikes can actually get about 7 to 8 feet long. So that's how incredible these spikes are. Another amazing fact about these spikes is these spikes can live for several years, and they estimate that these spikes can live between 7 to 12 years. So for 7 to 12 years, you can expect flowers to be blooming off of the same spike. Another incredible feature about these spikes is the fact that they are sequential blooming spikes, meaning that they will bloom one flower at a time and can be continuous throughout the entire year. So this means winter, spring, summer, fall, these orchids can answer the blooming call. The way this works is there will be a bud that forms within a sheath-like material, and there it will grow until it is large enough to drop out of this sheath. And that is where it will grow until the bloom becomes large enough to emerge. And soon it will begin to spread its wings and fly. And standing there before you will be such a phenomenal creature, which is oftentimes referred to as the samurai warrior, because indeed that is what it looks like to me, as we can take a look very closely at this bloom, and you are going to see that samurai warrior with its very combative helmet, And also look at that chest plate right there, adorned in his magnificent samurai warrior uniform. And taking a look, you can even see his swords that are strapped on to his back. Indeed, quite an awesome warrior, if I do say so myself. And this is also a very nice sized blossom as well. As you can see, it is about the size of my hand, about 5 inches in diameter. So yes, a pretty nice size on this Psychopsis. Now, the type of orchid that I have here is a Hildos Mendenhall, and that is the size of this orchid. Now, depending on the variety that it may be can determine the size as well, but this is usually round about the size of all Psychopsis orchids, so you are still getting a pretty nice sized bloom. Now, there isn't a huge variant in the colors or the patterns of the Psychopsis orchid, but look at these blooms. I mean, how impressive are they? You really couldn't ask for more than this. So even with that in mind, you will not be disappointed with this orchid. Now, there is another color that is known as well as called the albino form of the Psychopsis, and you will find in those orchids it's more of a variation of different shadings of yellow, which is also beautiful as well. But back to the subject at hand, folks. I know we were having a good time talking about the blooms. Now, once the blooms do begin to fade, as you can see here, it is beginning to wilt, and eventually it will deteriorate away and this will fall. And if we take a close look, behind the fading flower, you will actually begin to see the new bud beginning to emerge. And indeed, while this is preparing to fall, this is preparing to bloom. And then the cycle continues yet again. And because the Psychopsis orchid is a sequential bloomer, that is one of the most incredible facts about this orchid, because this can actually bloom for you almost every month and throughout the entire year. And folks, if that was not amazing enough with all of the fascinating facts that I've already shared, well, brace yourself, folks. Because yes, indeed, there is still so much more. So let's talk about the amazing Psychopsis spikes yet again, because upon closer inspection, we will discover so many hidden treasures. And if we take a closer look at these spikes, we will begin to realize that there is some form of covering and evenly spaced throughout these spikes. And the covering actually appears to be some form of dried sheath material. Now, also within the dried sheath material, we will begin to realize and feel that there is a bump or a nubbins right here, which is actually the raised nodes. And as orchid growers, we all know that raised nodes can mean the potential of either keikis, secondary spikes, or maybe even branches off of the spike. So what does it mean for the Psychopsis and its very intriguing spikes? What it means is that yes, indeed, it can create secondary spikes. And also it does have the potential of actually being a propagation method, because it too can create keikis right off of the spike. And believe it or not, folks, a Psychopsis orchid can actually create a secondary, third dairy, fourth dairy, or however many dairy spikes it wants to create. And it can do it naturally, and it can also do it on its own. And I actually got to witness this at an orchid nursery where they had a particular Psychopsis that went spike crazy. And it had so many branchlets growing out of the spikes that indeed it looked like a tree. And within each spike branchlet, it also had these beautiful Psychopsis blooms. So indeed, it can happen, and it can happen naturally and on its own. But unfortunately, as orchid growers, that doesn't happen too often. And normally when we do see secondary spikes, they usually occur when the actual spike has been damaged, and usually when it's broken off. And right here is a perfect example. As you can see, this is where the spike initially broke off. Underneath was a node where a secondary spike decided to grow. And as we take this up, we will see that indeed that emergency spike was right on time, as this has sustained its livelihood in its blooms. And right here is another example. If we take this up, I mean all the way up where we see the beautiful blossoms right here. As you can see, there are two of them, but we all know that per spike there usually is just one sequential bloom. So what gives? Well, what happened is right there. Do you guys see it? Okay, right there in the center appears to be a bud that absolutely went dud. So we had a bloom point right here that was no longer working and in order and would not create any more buds. So this decided to take the node below and promote another spike. Now somewhere along the line it decided that 2 was better than 1, and it still continued to travel on with this spike as well. So indeed now we have branches or 2 spikes off of this one spike right here, and of course giving off these beautiful blooms. And this right here is our last and final example. As you can see, this orchid right here decided to grow individually 3 spikes right here. You see it, right? 1, 2, and 3. 3 individual spikes, right? Well, let's take a closer look. And as we turn this orchid around, the mystery is indeed uncovered, because if we take a closer look, oh me, oh my, there it is. That's where the spike broke, and as you can see, it's nearer to the base area. So indeed what this orchid decided to do is throw off not only a secondary, but a third-dairy and a fourth-dairy spike. So in this case, it did decide to create 3 more spikes. And this particular Psychopsis right here, this one is actually mine. You know, the one with the broken spike. Yep, that's me. The other orchids are actually the orchids that I will be selling on eBay, but this one is mine. And you have to imagine, when I first seen this orchid spike broke like this, I was so heartbroken. But you guys know that nothing can ever keep me down for too long, and I am determined. So indeed, I decided to see that silver lining in that darkened cloud and decided I want to discover even more about the potential of the Psychopsis orchid, or at least mine. So I will be doing an experiment with this orchid right here. So indeed, wish me luck, and make sure you stay tuned for more, because it is going to be an interesting ride, that's for sure. Okay, so just to recap on how miraculous and amazing the Psychopsis orchid is. You guys know that this is a sequential bloomer, blooming 1 orchid blossom at a time, and it can bloom almost every month throughout the entire year and for 7 to 12 years. Can you imagine how many blooms that means? I'm no mathematician, but I can tell you that is a whole lot of these gorgeous and amazing blooms. And as we already spoke about, these are some pretty amazing blooms at a very, very nice size. So indeed, you can imagine how much energy it takes to create all of the bloom output that this orchid is capable of producing. So indeed, miraculous, and what I would call an orchid that definitely has that flower power. And we also talked about the power and the potential of the spikes of these Psychopsis. Indeed, it is phenomenal and amazing at how powerful this orchid is. It is an orchid that I consider a powerhouse of an orchid, because within these spikes, it can also create secondary, third-dairy, fourth-dairy, however many spikes it needs to. And indeed, it always has a backup emergency plan, because in case something ever happens to these spikes or to the orchid, it can always sustain itself through the livelihood of the blooms. It is going to guarantee that one way or the other. And also for the fact that these spikes can also produce plantlets or cakeys right off of the spike as well. Just tells you how determined this orchid is to survive, and is indeed one of the reasons why this is my most favorite orchid, indeed the Psychopsis. And that, my friend, is a complete orchid wrap. Now, I want to know from you guys, how many of you guys are Psychopsis growers, and what have you guys found out about your Psychopsis orchids? Also, if you guys have discovered some phenomenal facts about your orchids and it isn't talked about so often, please be sure to share. The more that we know, the more that we can grow. And be sure to post those comments below. And I am truly hoping that you guys enjoyed this video. If you liked it, you guys already know what to do. Also, you guys know that I am on Facebook. Check me out there at My Orchid Adventures right on Facebook. And if you guys want to write or send me something, you definitely can do that at the following address below. And also, you know that I do sell some phenomenal orchids right on eBay. You can check me out at eBay, and I'll post that description below. Now, you guys already know that I truly do love and appreciate you guys all. Mwah!